Under the shimmering Christmas lights, a little girl whispered to Santa, "I miss so much." This wasn't my mom's last Christmas. She had no idea that a lonely man standing behind her heard every word, and what he did next would change her life forever. Snow drifted through the December air like tiny shards of glass, catching in the golden glow of Rockefeller Center's Christmas lights. Families huddled together, children squealed as they pointed at the towering tree, and the sharp smell of roasted chestnuts mingled with winter wind. But for Desmond Carter, none of it meant anything. The world could have been muted under a layer of ice, and he wouldn't have noticed. He walked through the crowd in his charcoal wool coat, tailored, expensive, and utterly useless against the cold sinking from within. Every laugh, every carol, even the ringing bells from the Salvation Army volunteers blended into a hollow blur. His heart hadn't felt warm in 3 years, not since the night he lost the only person who ever made Christmas feel real. He remembered holding his wife Angela's hand in the hospital, feeling it go slack, and how the world had gone silent before the doctors even spoke. Tonight, the memory clung to him like frost, tightening his chest the way it did every December. Desmond was a wealthy businessman and a single father, raising his young son Jordan alone. The pain of losing his soulmate and the weight of raising a child by himself had frozen his heart completely. Jordan was at home with his grandmother tonight, while Desmond walked through the city, trying to escape the emptiness that haunted him. He would have walked right past Santa's little stage if not for the voice. Small, fragile, trembling like a dying flame. "It's Mommy's last Christmas. Please, Santa, before she doesn't wake up." The words sliced through the quiet numbness like a jagged blade. Desmond stopped so abruptly that a couple behind him muttered in annoyance as they swerved around. He barely noticed. His breath caught in his throat, a sharp jolt of pain shooting across his ribs as if someone had reached inside and squeezed. A plume of white fog escaped his lips as he exhaled shakily, grounding himself against a wave of emotion he hadn't felt in years. He turned sharply and saw her, a little girl no older than 7, standing before the Santa in a thin, faded pink coat with frayed cuffs. The zipper was broken halfway, leaving her sweater exposed to the biting wind around her. Other children tugged parents toward toy shops, bundled in puffy designer jackets and beanies with fur pom-poms. She looked like she had stepped out of another world entirely. Her honey-brown hair was tied back in a sloppy ponytail, cheeks flushed not from excitement, but from cold. Her eyes shimmered with tears she fought hard not to release. She thanked Santa in a small voice and stepped down from the platform, wobbling like her legs were too tired to hold her. Desmond saw her knees buckle before her body fully gave out. Instinct overtook him. His feet moved before his mind could catch up, pushing through the crowd until he knelt beside her on the icy pavement. Hey, sweetheart, easy." His voice came out rough, scraped from disuse. Her eyes flickered open, unfocused, but still holding that strange mix of fear and determination. She tried to stand, but collapsed again. Desmond steadied her shoulders gently. "Are you hurt?" She blinked slowly, then whispered, her voice hardly more than a breath. "Please don't take me away. I have to get home to Mommy." The words hit him harder than the winter wind ever could, a little girl freezing, collapsing on a Christmas night. And her only fear was being taken away from her sick mother. Something cracked open inside Desmond, something he thought had died years ago. His fatherly instinct awakened. He didn't know it yet, but this was the moment his entire life shifted. This was the moment Christmas found him again. Desmond didn't remember standing up. One moment he was kneeling on the cold pavement beside the little girl, and the next he was lifting her gently into his arms. She weighed almost nothing. Her coat was thin, stiff with dried snow, and when her cheek brushed his collar, he felt how cold her skin was. Far too cold for a child outside at night. "Let's get you warm," he murmured, though he wasn't sure she heard him. She shivered faintly, her breaths short and uneven. Desmond tightened his grip and scanned the area for the nearest vendor. A coffee cart glowed under a yellow lamp down the block. He moved quickly, weaving through crowds of shoppers and tourists who barely noticed them. Inside, something unsettling tugged at him. A protective instinct he hadn't felt since Angela passed and left him to raise their son alone. At the cart, he bought the largest cup of hot cocoa they had. The vendor raised a brow when he saw the child bundled in Desmond's arms. He didn't bother explaining, he just asked for extra whipped cream. Desmond set her gently on a bench nearby before handing her the cup. She reached for it with trembling fingers, the heat barely registering as her hands shook violently. Her lips were tinged blue. Her voice came out rasped and small. "Thank you." The way she said it, soft, polite, like she didn't expect kindness, hit him in a place he had long boarded shut. "Drink slowly," he said. She nodded, though she could barely hold the cup steady. He moved closer, steadying her hands with his own. For a moment, she looked up at him. Her eyes were the color of winter branches, brown with hints of desperation. "What's your name?" he asked. "Lily," she whispered. "Lily Morrison." Before he could say more, his phone began vibrating in his pocket, sharp, insistent, endlessly. He ignored it at first, but the buzzing continued. Board messages, investor alerts, the meeting he was already late for. He pulled the phone out and glanced at the screen. 10 notifications, 6 missed calls, a major investor's name flashing across the top. He stared at it, grip tightening. Then he looked at Lily. Really looked at her thin wrists, her trembling lips, her little body curled inward from cold and hunger. When she tried to take another sip of cocoa, her hand shook so hard that a drop landed on her sleeve and froze almost instantly. Her fingers tightened around the paper cup as if it were the only warmth she had left in the world. And in that moment, something in him shifted. He pressed the power button on the phone until the screen went black. The silence that followed felt like breathing for the first time. Lily didn't seem to notice his inner war. She was staring at the swirl of whipped cream melting into the cocoa, eyes hazy with exhaustion. "When was the last time you ate?" Desmond asked. She shrugged without looking up. "Yesterday, I think. Sometimes I skip so Mommy can have more." Her words were said simply without complaint, as if it were just part of life. Desmond felt a sharp pinch under his ribs. "Do you have heat at home?" She shook her head. "The heater broke. We keep extra socks on our hands." Her breath fogged the air in front of her. "Mommy's really sick. She sleeps a lot. I walk here so she can rest." She tried to stand. Her legs buckled beneath her. On instinct, she reached out, not for his hand, but for the hem of his long coat. Just a soft tug, a tiny pull. As if she didn't want to assume she was allowed to hold on to him. Desmond slowed, letting her steady herself, adjusting his pace to match her tiny, careful steps. The gesture was so small, so unthinking, that it broke him more than any confession she'd made. As they walked north, the city changed block by block, the festive lights growing thinner, the crowds fading, the holiday cheer dissipating into darkened storefronts and forgotten corners. Lily walked in silence, holding on to his coat the entire time. Once, when a gust of wind blew hard down 112th Street, she pressed closer to him, not quite touching, but leaning into his shadow like it offered protection. "How far is it?" he asked gently. "Just a little more," she said. "Mommy can't climb the stairs anymore, so I go everywhere for us." His throat tightened. She guided him past a half-lit liquor store, a shuttered laundromat, and finally to a narrow brick building with a rusted fire escape. The entryway light flickered weakly above the door. As they approached, a tall man stepped out, lean, sneering, arms crossed over a dirty puffer jacket. His eyes dragged over Lily with a cold amusement that made Desmond instantly bristle. "Well, look who finally crawled back," the man drawled. Lily froze behind Desmond, gripping his coat with both hands now. "Vincent," she whispered, voice barely audible. So this was him, the man she feared. Vincent smirked at Desmond, sizing him up. "Nice coat. You her new charity project or something?" Desmond stepped forward instinctively, shielding Lily. "I'm walking her home." "Cute," Vincent snorted. "Tell your mom rent's overdue. If I don't see money by Friday, both of you are out. And no crying to me about heaters or whatever." Lily flinched. Vincent noticed and smiled. Desmond felt something hot surge through him. Rage. A clean, sharp kind he hadn't felt since the night a doctor told him his wife wasn't coming home. He didn't raise his voice, didn't step closer. He just said very quietly, "Move." Vincent's smirk faltered. "Whatever," he muttered, stepping aside. "Not my problem." He disappeared into the alley. Desmond exhaled slowly, turning to Lily. "Let's get you inside." She nodded, leading him up the creaking stairwell toward a door with peeling paint. She fumbled with the lock. Desmond took in a slow breath, bracing himself. He didn't know what he expected. He only knew that whatever waited behind that door, it was going to change everything. The door creaked open with a tired groan, as if even the hinges were weary from carrying too many winters. The moment Desmond stepped inside, the cold punched him first. Sharp, stagnant, the kind that seeped into bones and lingered. Then came the smell, a damp mixture of mildew and old carpet, layered faintly with the bitter sting of antiseptic, the kind hospitals used when they'd given up trying to make anything smell clean. It was a scent of survival, not comfort. The air felt heavy, unmoving, like it had been sealed shut along with the hope inside this apartment. A faint, uneven hum vibrated through the space, and when Desmond turned his head, he saw it. The oxygen machine in the corner, rattling with a sickly rhythm that sounded like it might give out at any moment. Its thin tube snaked across the floor toward a small bedroom. Every few seconds it sputtered, skipped, then resumed its desperate hum. Lily took off her shoes with practiced precision and placed them neatly beside the door. The soles were worn through almost entirely. She motioned for Desmond to follow her, her tiny shoulders hunched protectively, as if she were bracing for him to judge the place she called home. He stepped in, and the soft crunch under his shoe made him freeze. The linoleum beneath him was cracked, curling at the edges like burnt paper. He looked down at his polished Italian leather shoes, sleek, spotless, absurdly expensive, and the contrast hit him like a slap. They looked monstrous on this fragile floor, out of place, almost shameful. He swallowed hard, pushing past the guilt clawing at his chest. "Lily, is that you?" A faint voice whispered from the bedroom. It was thin, brittle, as though it were made of threads fraying at the edges. Lily hurried forward. "Mommy, I'm here. I brought someone good." Desmond followed her into the small room, and the sight hit him harder than the cold ever could. Witnessing this scene, his painful past came flooding back. Sarah Morrison lay on a narrow mattress, if it could be called that, propped up with two mismatched pillows. Her face was ghostly pale, cheeks hollowed, lips dry and cracked. Her hair clung to her forehead in limp strands. Every inhale looked like a battle she fought alone. The blanket covering her was thin and patchy, barely warming her frail frame. When she saw Desmond, her eyes widened a fraction, though exhaustion quickly dragged them half-closed again. "Hi," she whispered, her voice a dry rasp. She tried to push herself up on trembling elbows. Lily rushed to support her. "Mommy, don't! It's okay! He's here to help!" But Sarah shook her head weakly, determined to show some semblance of strength in front of a stranger. Her arms buckled almost immediately, and she began to collapse. Desmond lunged forward, catching her just before she hit the bed. She weighed less than he imagined, so light it startled him. "It's all right," he said softly. Don't push yourself. Sarah blinked slowly, her breath shallow, her body trembling as she tried to regain her bearings. I'm sorry, she whispered. Everything's a bit foggy. Lily sat beside her, brushing a hand along her mother's forehead with heartbreaking tenderness. Mommy, rest, please. Sarah smiled faintly at her daughter, then shifted her gaze to Desmond, studying him despite her fading strength. The gratitude in her eyes was unmistakable, and so was the shame. She looked at the cracked ceiling as if apologizing for the place she forced her daughter to grow up in. Desmond took a moment to observe everything around him. A single lamp flickered weakly, barely illuminating the room. Piles of medical bills sat on an overturned laundry basket. A space heater in the corner was unplugged, likely broken, its cord frayed near the base. The window pane rattled with every gust of wind, letting streams of freezing air slip through. A small drawing taped to the wall caught his eye. A crude sketch of Lily holding a Christmas star, her mother smiling beside her. The edges of the paper were smudged, but the hope in the drawing was unmistakable. Lily tugged gently on Desmond's sleeve. Can you help her? She asked, her voice tiny, fragile. Her eyes, those deep winter brown eyes, held a mixture of desperation and trust. Trust he hadn't earned yet, but she offered anyway. Desmond nodded, clearing his throat. I'll do everything I can. Sarah's eyes fluttered open again, struggling to focus. Her hand reached out weakly, trembling as it touched his coat sleeve. Please, she whispered, her voice barely more than air. Don't let them take Lily. Desmond frowned slightly. Who's trying to take her? Sarah hesitated, her gaze flicking toward the cracked ceiling, as if weighing whether to speak. Her father, Kevin. He left years ago, but lately I think he knows I'm dying. Her voice shook, barely audible. He doesn't want Lily. He just wants to control her. The room fell silent. Lily froze, her small hand tightening around her mother's fingers. Desmond stared at Sarah. Heart pounding. He didn't know the details yet. Not about CPS, not about the landlord, not about the threats he would soon face. But there was something in her plea, something raw and terrified that rooted itself deep inside him. Protect her. The words echoed in his mind, like a vow he wasn't sure he understood, but somehow already felt bound to as Sarah's hand fell weakly back onto the blanket. Lily gently pulled it into her lap, holding it close. Desmond stood there absorbing the weight of the moment, feeling the warmth of the room's desperation settle on his shoulders. He realized that stepping into this apartment wasn't just entering their world. It was stepping into a responsibility he never expected, one he wasn't sure he was ready for. But as he looked at Lily, clutching her mother's hand like a lifeline, he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He couldn't walk away. Because Desmond couldn't turn his back on this, like caring for a child he once feared he would lose forever. For a long moment, the room felt frozen. No sound, but the uneven hiss of the failing oxygen machine and the faint hum of the city seeping through the cracked window. Desmond stood there feeling a weight settle in his chest, a weight he hadn't known since the days he carried his wife through hospital corridors. But then, something clicked inside him. An instinct, a decision, a promise he hadn't spoken yet, but felt down to his bones. He shrugged off his coat, laid it across the foot of Sarah's bed, and moved with a steady purpose that surprised even him. In the dim light of the apartment, he pulled out his phone and dialed his private doctor. Dr. Patterson. It's Desmond Carter. I need a house call immediately. Yes, tonight. Bring whatever equipment you can. She's critical. His tone brooked no argument. He ended the call and turned toward the cold, dark kitchen. The refrigerator door squeaked when he opened it. Inside, there were only two things: half a bottle of expired juice and a single apple with bruises spreading like ink across its skin. Desmond exhaled sharply through his nose, anger simmering under the surface. Not at Sarah, not at Lily, but at a world that let this happen. He found a small pot, rinsed it in the sink, and filled it with water. The faucet sputtered before coughing out a thin, uneven stream. The apartment felt like it was barely holding itself together. He warmed the water as best as the old stove allowed, poured it into a chipped mug, and carried it to the bedroom. "Let's try to get some fluids in her," he said quietly. Sarah stirred, her eyelids fluttering as he lifted her gently, supporting her shoulders with one arm. Her skin felt cold, too cold, like she had been drifting between worlds. "Drink slowly," he whispered. She tried. Her lips trembled as they touched the warm water, and she managed a small sip. It was barely anything, but it was something. Lily watched silently from the foot of the bed, her hands balled into fists inside her sleeves. When Desmond set the mug aside, he took off his cashmere scarf and wrapped it carefully around her small neck. "It's warm," she said softly, brushing her cheek against it as if she couldn't help it. "It's yours now," he replied. Her eyes widened in a mix of surprise and gratitude that made his chest tighten. He turned next to the window where icy wind was slipping in through the cracks. With a roll of duct tape he found under the sink and a piece of cardboard from a cereal box, he patched the draft. It wasn't perfect, but the room grew noticeably warmer. The apartment door rattled once, and Lily jumped, fear flashing in her eyes. Desmond put a hand on her shoulder. "It's all right. No one can come in." The small reassurance seemed to melt something in her. She stepped closer, leaning into him ever so slightly. Before he could say anything else, his phone rang. He pulled it out and saw his assistant's name. Reluctantly, he answered. "Desmond, where the hell are you?" Tanya's voice was frantic. "The board is in chaos. The stock dipped 6 points in 2 hours. Henderson flew in for the meeting and you didn't show. They're asking if you're stepping down." "And I'm busy," he cut in. "Busy? Desmond, this could cost you everything." He looked at Sarah's frail body, at Lily's terrified eyes, at the broken heater, and with a calm he didn't know he possessed, he said, "Then it will cost me everything. I'm where I need to be." He hung up. He didn't explain. He didn't justify it. For the first time in years, he simply chose what mattered. It wasn't long before Dr. Patterson arrived with his black medical bag, his breath fogging in the stairwell. He examined Sarah, adjusted her oxygen flow, started an IV, and made notes with tight brows that told Desmond everything he needed to know. Sarah was running out of time. After the doctor left with a promise to return in the morning with medication, Desmond cleaned the spilled pills on the floor, organized the cluttered nightstand, and helped Lily pick up stray blankets. She moved like a child twice her age, careful, quiet, accustomed to pain. When she found a broken ornament under the bed, a small ceramic angel, she handed it to Desmond. "It was Mommy's favorite. I tried to fix the wing, but the glue didn't hold." He crouched beside her, examining the tiny figure. "We'll fix it together," he said, and Lily nodded, pressing her lips together to hide how much that meant. The night didn't end the way any of them expected. Just after Dr. Patterson left, Sarah's breathing grew thin and erratic, each inhale dragging as if the air itself had become too heavy for her lungs. Desmond tried to steady her, but within minutes, her skin turned cold and her pulse fluttered like a fading signal. He didn't hesitate. He called 911, his voice low but fierce, and the paramedics arrived in a blur of red lights that painted the narrow hallway of the apartment building. Lily clung to his coat the entire ride, her small sobs shaking against his side as the ambulance rushed through the city. At the hospital, they stayed until Sarah was stable, if that word could even apply. Machines did most of the work, hissing and clicking beside her bed as nurses moved quietly around the room. Lily refused to let go of Desmond's hand the entire time, her eyes wide and dry, too tired for tears. It wasn't long before visiting hours ended. and a nurse gently suggested that Lily needed rest. Desmond looked at the sterile waiting area, hard plastic chairs, buzzing fluorescent lights, the scent of antiseptic, and knew this wasn't a place for a child to fall asleep. Without a word, he gathered Lily into his arms. "Come on," he whispered. "You're coming with me tonight." Later at his office, he brought Lily with him, not for convenience, but because the thought of leaving her alone in that freezing apartment twisted his stomach. The building's lobby sparkled with a massive Christmas tree, gold ribbons, and warm lights. Lily stared up at it with the quiet awe of a child who learned young not to ask for things she couldn't have. He brought her into his private office, sleek, minimalist glass walls overlooking Manhattan. For the first time, the space felt too large, too empty. Lily sat at his glass desk, her legs dangling off the chair, sketching with the crayons he kept in a drawer from some long-forgotten corporate family day. Desmond reviewed a contract half-heartedly, eyes drifting to her every few seconds. At one point, her hands slowed, her eyelids drooping, her head tipped to the side, and before he could move, it gently landed against his arm. She was asleep, soft, small, trusting without hesitation. Something inside Desmond unraveled. He didn't move, not even when his arm began to tingle, not even when she shifted and tucked her cheek closer against him. He sat perfectly still, watching the soft rise and fall of her breath, feeling the faint warmth of her presence seep into the cold parts of himself he thought would never thaw. He looked at Lily, sleeping peacefully against him, wrapped in his scarf, safe for the first time in who knew how long. And in that quiet, dim office high above the city, he made a silent vow. He would not let anyone take her. The days that followed unfolded with a strange, quiet rhythm, one that felt nothing like Desmond's old life, yet somehow steadier than anything he'd known in years. The days by Sarah's hospital bed and standing alongside Lily gradually helped Desmond rediscover the feeling of being a father, something he had buried deep within the pain of loss. Lily became a small ray of light that helped revive his heart. Morning after morning, he found himself walking into the hospital lobby instead of a boardroom, carrying a bag of warm breakfast sandwiches or small cartons of chocolate milk because Lily liked to drink hers slowly, saving the last sip as a treat. Nurses began to greet them by name. "Morning, Lily. Morning, Mr. Carter." He corrected them, told them to call him Desmond, but the title stuck anyway. Lily walked beside him each day, her small hand wrapped around two of his fingers, always leaving space, never gripping fully unless she was frightened. And every time she tightened her hold, each time her little palm pressed into his, something inside him softened just a little more. Sarah's room had become an anchor for them both, even when she drifted in and out of consciousness. She tried to smile each time Lily ran to her side. Some afternoons, when Sarah was awake long enough, Lily would sit on the edge of the bed reading her short passages from picture books, her voice wobbling but determined. On quieter evenings, Desmond simply sat beside Sarah while Lily napped in the recliner. Just the three of them in a space that felt fragile, suspended between hope and reality. He stayed even when no one spoke, even when the silence weighed heavy, because for the first time since losing his wife, that silence didn't feel empty. It felt necessary. At home, his penthouse began to lose its cold, museum-like perfection. It started with one of Lily's candy wrappers, bright red, sugary, left on his marble counter after she snuck a treat into his pocket at the hospital. Then came a crooked little paper snowflake she made during art therapy hour. She had proudly stuck it to his pristine glass wall with a piece of medical tape. He hadn't taken it down. The next day, she left her scarf on his sofa. The day after that, one of her mismatched mittens appeared on the floor beside his leather armchair. Before long, his immaculate home was peppered with small traces of her, a pink glove here, a tiny sketch there, and each time he spotted one, something warm flickered in his chest, faint but persistent, like an ember refusing to die. For the first time in years, Desmond slept through the night. It happened unexpectedly. He had come home exhausted, Lily's weight still lingering on his shoulder from when she fell asleep in the car. When he closed his eyes, he expected the usual restless tossing, dark memories, the phantom ache of loss. But instead, he drifted into a deep, uninterrupted sleep. No nightmares, no jolting awake. When he looked at himself in the bathroom mirror the next morning, he noticed something strange. The crease between his brows, the one that had taken root after his wife died, was softer, less carved. He stared at his reflection for a long moment before shaking his head with disbelief. "What are you doing to me, kid?" he muttered, though he already knew the answer. Lily was helping him rediscover the father he thought had died with Angela. Later that week, when Desmond walked into the hospital room, he found Sarah propped up with extra pillows, a faint glow to her face. Her hands moved slowly, awkwardly, but with intention. She was knitting, or trying to. A small, lumpy scarf lay across her lap, full of uneven stitches and holes from dropped loops, but she continued working with a determination that was almost painful to watch. Lily looked up proudly. "She's been doing it all morning," she whispered. "She wanted to surprise you." Desmond approached the bed gently. Sarah paused, catching her breath, then held up the scarf with trembling hands. "It's not very good," she rasped, her smile crooked but warm. "But I wanted you to have something made with my hands, not just my gratitude." Desmond swallowed hard, blinking against a sudden sting in his eyes. "It's perfect," he said, and he meant it. Lily crawled into the bed beside her mom, resting her head lightly on Sarah's shoulder. "Mommy says you brought warmth back into my life," she said softly. "But I think you brought it back into yours, too." Desmond didn't trust himself to answer, but the way his breath hitched gave him away. The days continued like this. Small moments that stitched themselves into something bigger. He learned to braid Lily's hair, though the first few attempts were disasters. She laughed, insisting it looked like a crooked pretzel, and he tried again until it resembled something presentable. She doodled on sticky notes and left them on his laptop, simple drawings of trees, snowmen, or him holding a star. When she found a tie she liked in his closet, a deep green one, she decided it made him look less sad. He wore it the next morning. One evening, as the hospital sky turned amber, Sarah fell asleep with her head turned toward the window. Lily was curled on the recliner, bundled in Desmond's scarf. The monitors beeped softly, the steady pulse of machines filling the room with a fragile peace. It was then that the calm shattered. A warning alarm chimed. A single beep, then another, sharper, more urgent. The heart monitor line fluttered with irregular spikes. Desmond's blood ran cold. He stepped forward, hand hovering, eyes locked on the rising chaos on the screen. Nurses rushed in, checking Sarah's vitals, adjusting wires, murmuring to each other with grim faces. Lily jerked awake, standing immediately, her breath catching. "Mommy!" Her voice shook. Desmond placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "It's okay, sweetheart. They're helping her." But his voice was tight, betraying fear he couldn't hide. Lily's fingers curled into his coat, gripping tightly. This time, not just the hem, but his entire hand, holding on with all her strength. As the nurses worked, Sarah's body trembled, her breaths shallow, fading. Lily pressed closer into Desmond, shaking, tears welling, but refusing to fall. Desmond wrapped his arm around her, pulling her into his chest, grounding her as much as he could. The machine beeped again, slow, steady, ominous, the calm before the storm had arrived. The hallway lights outside Sarah's room flickered dimly as the night deepened, but inside the room, everything felt overwhelmingly bright, too bright for what was happening. Machines beeped in uneven, stumbling rhythms. Nurses moved with practiced urgency. and the cold sting of antiseptic filled the air as they adjusted tubes and monitored screens. Lily clung to Desmond, her small hands gripping fistfuls of his coat as though he were the only solid thing left in a world falling apart. Her trembling traveled up his arm, settling painfully into his chest. He tried to steady her with his own breathing, but even he couldn't catch a full breath. "Mommy," Lily whispered, voice cracking as she stared at the rise and fall of Sarah's fragile chest. "Mommy, please wake up. Please." Her words faded into a choked whimper. Desmond guided her toward the bedside, kneeling with her so they were both level with Sarah's face. The fluorescent light washed over her pale skin, giving her an otherworldly stillness. Her breaths were faint and uneven, like brittle paper tearing with every inhale. Desmond didn't speak. He didn't trust his voice. He just wrapped an arm around Lily, holding her tightly as the heart monitor gave another uneven spike. Then, impossibly, Sarah stirred, just barely. Her eyelids fluttered, struggling to lift against exhaustion and pain. Lily gasped. "Mommy," she whispered again, her entire body pulling forward like she could will her mother awake through sheer love alone. Sarah's eyes opened halfway, unfocused at first, then slowly searching the room until they found Lily, and then shifted to Desmond. Something softened in her gaze, something that looked like relief mixed with goodbye. Her lips parted and a long, slow breath escaped. "You," she whispered, her voice thin as air. "You stayed." Desmond swallowed, nodding, though the motion barely felt real. "Always," he said, his voice rougher than he expected. Sarah blinked as though those words meant more than he realized. With effort that looked almost painful, she lifted her hand slightly, trembling, shaking, reaching. Desmond didn't understand at first, until Lily stepped closer and gently guided her mother's hand into his. Sarah closed her fingers around both of theirs. In her final breath, she placed Lily's weak hand into Desmond's and whispered her dying wish. "Protect her. Please don't let her be alone." Lily broke, not into loud sobs, but into tiny, silent gasps, like her body was folding in on itself. She shook violently, tears spilling unchecked down her cheeks as she pressed her forehead to her mother's hand. "Mommy, don't go," she whispered. "Please don't go." Desmond pulled her in closer, wrapping both arms around her, anchoring her tiny body against his chest, as though he could shield her from what was coming. He felt her shaking seep into him, felt her breath hitch again and again, felt the sting in his own eyes he could no longer hold back. Sarah's breathing slowed, faint, fading, struggling against the inevitable. The room fell into a stillness so deep it felt like the world outside disappeared entirely. Even the nurses stepped back, sensing the finality in the air. Lily lifted her head just enough to see her mother's face. "Mommy," she whispered. "I love you." Sarah's eyes glistened with the thin thread of strength she had left. She whispered, "I love you too, my baby." Then her gaze drifted one last time to Desmond, soft, grateful, trusting. Take care of each other. Her chest rose once, fell, and didn't rise again. The monitor released a long, flat tone. Lily's body crumpled. She didn't scream. She didn't wail. She shook, small, uncontrollable tremors that tore through her like shock waves. Desmond wrapped himself around her, holding her tightly, whispering, "I've got you. I've got you." Again and again, because it was all he could think to say, he held her until her trembling eased enough for her to breathe, though her breaths were shallow and broken. Then the air shifted. Just as the grief hung heavy in the air, Kevin, Lily's biological father, a man of neglect and violence, appeared, demanding to take her away to seize control. A slow, mocking clap echoed from the doorway. Desmond's head snapped up, blood running cold. A man leaned against the doorframe, tall, smug. wearing a cheap leather jacket and the same kind of ugly confidence Desmond had seen in men who'd never earned anything. His eyes were sharp, assessing, and full of something cruel. Lily stiffened instantly, her fingers digging painfully into Desmond's sleeve. "No," she whimpered. "No, no, no." The man smirked. "Well," he said, stepping fully into the room with an oily swagger. "Isn't this touching?" Desmond shifted instinctively, pulling Lily behind him. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice low and cold. The man tilted his head. "Name's Kevin Brooks." His grin widened, revealing a streak of malice. "Lily's father." Lily let out a small, broken cry. Desmond straightened, position protective, eyes narrowing with a controlled fury he hadn't felt in years. Kevin lifted his chin unfazed. "I heard her mom finally kicked the bucket, which means it's time for me to step in and claim what's mine." He gave Lily a look that made Desmond's stomach twist. "Daddy's here." Desmond's hands curled into fists. This man, this stranger, this predator dressed as a parent. No, not again, not ever. Kevin stepped forward, smirking. "Pack her things. I'm taking her tonight." Desmond stepped forward, placing himself fully between Kevin and Lily, his voice like steel. "You're not taking her anywhere." Kevin's eyes narrowed, the smirk fading. "You think this is over?" he hissed. "Fine. We'll do this the legal way. You want to play hero?" He jabbed a finger toward Lily. "Then I'll see you in court." He turned on his heel, boots echoing in the hallway, leaving behind a silence that buzzed with unfinished threats. Lily clung to Desmond's coat, eyes wide with fear. "He can't." "He won't really take me, right?" Desmond knelt beside her, voice low and steady. "Not while I'm breathing." And Desmond knew this was the moment everything would come undone, or everything would begin. Desmond, with the heart of a father who had once lost loved ones, could not let that happen. The custody dispute was brought to court. A week had passed since Sarah's funeral. The days had blurred together, each one filled with quiet mourning and careful hope. But this day was different. This was the day Desmond would have to fight not just with love, but with law. The courthouse smelled faintly of old wood and older worries, papers stacked for decades, the ghosts of arguments lingering in the corners, and the weight of decisions that had changed countless lives. Desmond sat in the front row, Lily tucked tightly against his side, her small hand wrapped firmly around his. She clutched her sketchbook to her chest like armor. She hadn't spoken much since Sarah's passing. Her eyes were swollen, her breaths soft and uneven, as if each inhale fought against the fear of what might happen next. The courtroom was small, almost intimate, with only a few rows of benches, and a judge who looked like she had shouldered the heartache of hundreds of families. Judge Patricia Williams, silver hair pulled into a low bun, lines around her eyes suggesting both sternness and compassion, the kind of woman who could read the truth behind every trembling word. Across the aisle, Kevin Brooks lounged in his chair, legs sprawled too confidently, a smug grin carved across his face. His cheap leather jacket squeaked each time he adjusted his posture. His lawyer, a sharp-eyed man with a slicked-back haircut and a tie that shone too brightly under the courtroom lights, shuffled papers, as if the sound made them more convincing. Kevin kept glancing at Lily with a predatory ownership that made Desmond's jaw clench. Lily pressed closer to him each time. The judge began. "We are here to determine temporary guardianship of minor child Lily Morrison." Her gaze swept the room. "Mr. Brooks, you may begin." Kevin's lawyer launched into a performance of paternal concern, weak, constructed, hollow, words like biology, rightful custody, re-establishing connections, spilled from his mouth with practiced ease. Kevin nodded solemnly at all the right moments, feigning heartbreak as though it were a coat he could put on and remove at will, but the cracks showed, smirks when he thought no one watched. Eyes flicking to the clock as if bored. When they finished, the judge turned her gaze to Desmond's attorney, Dana Whitfield, a woman with the poise of someone who had dismantled men like Kevin 100 times before. Dana stood calm and precise. She didn't rely on theatrics. She relied on truth. She laid out documented evidence of Kevin's abandonment, police records of domestic violence, witness statements, years of unpaid child support, multiple addresses changed without notice. She read the report from Sarah's hospice nurse detailing Kevin's complete absence from Lily's life. Then she presented evidence of Desmond's involvement, his financial support, his presence at the hospital, his care for both Sarah and Lily in Sarah's final weeks. The courtroom grew quieter with each sentence, the weight of reality suffocating the flimsy narrative Kevin tried to build. But the moment that shifted everything came when Dana said, "Your Honor, with permission, Lily would like to present something." The judge softened. "Lily, sweetheart, would you like to come up?" Lily looked up at Desmond first, eyes wide, silently asking for strength. He squeezed her hand gently. "I'm right here," he whispered. She nodded, stood slowly, and walked to the bench with her sketchbook held tightly against her chest. When she reached the judge's desk, she opened the book to a single page, a drawing, a Christmas tree. Her mother drawn as a small angel near the top watching over her. Lily herself standing beneath the tree, and beside her, holding her hand, was Desmond. The caption read in careful block letters, "The family Mommy wished for." That silenced the entire courtroom. The judge stared at it a long moment, her expression shifting, softening, cracking just enough to reveal something human beneath the professional mask. "Lily," she said gently. "Who drew this?" "I did," Lily whispered. It's what Mommy wanted." She said he stayed." She pointed to Desmond with a trembling finger. "He never left us, not even when things were scary." "And then, because truth has a way of pouring out once the door opens," she added in a small, breaking voice, "I don't want to go with the man who never came. I want to go with the man who did." The room went still. Desmond felt the air constrict in his throat. Kevin's lawyer rose to object, but the judge raised a hand to silence him. She turned to Desmond. "Mr. Carter, would you like to respond?" He stood slowly, every eye in the courtroom following him. He walked toward the front, stopping just behind Lily, his presence protective and unyielding. He knelt down beside her, but spoke directly to the judge. "Your Honor," he said, voice steady, thick with emotion he didn't try to hide. "I'm not here because of biology. I'm here because I showed up, because I held her when her mother died, because I promised Sarah I wouldn't let anything happen to her child." He took a breath, glancing at Kevin with blazing clarity. "This man abandoned Lily once. I will burn my entire fortune, every dollar I have, before I let him do it again." Gasps whispered through the courtroom. Even the judge's eyes flickered. She exhaled slowly, looked at Lily, then at Kevin, and with a firm, deliberate voice that echoed like a verdict carved from justice itself, she said, "Temporary legal guardianship is hereby granted to Desmond Carter with full adoption review scheduled after the new year." Kevin shot up from his seat, face red, shouting curses. The court officer quickly silenced him, but none of it mattered anymore. Lily ran into Desmond's arms, burying her face in his chest as tears, soft, relieved ones, finally broke free. He held her tightly, one hand cupping the back of her head, breathing in the fragile weight of the moment he'd fought for. "You're safe," he whispered. "I've got you." That afternoon, he carried her into her new room at his home, a space painted in soft seafoam green, with framed drawings lining the walls like museum pieces. A nightlight shaped like a star glowed gently in the corner. "This is mine," Lily breathed, touching the soft blanket on her bed. "All yours," Desmond said, kneeling beside her. She turned, taking his tie in both hands, straightening it with surprising concentration. "You ready?" she asked, echoing his earlier words. He smiled, warmth blooming where numbness used to live. With you, he said quietly. Always. Outside, the first flakes of snow began to fall, their first Christmas together just beginning. Lily moved in with Desmond in a warm home filled with Christmas lights, completely different from the cold emptiness where he had once raised his son alone. Gradually, traces of Lily, drawings, scarves, small toys, brought the warmth of childhood back into the house and into Desmond's heart. Christmas Eve settled gently over the city, layering New York in a soft hush that felt almost sacred. Snow drifted past the window of Desmond's home in slow, lazy spirals, catching the warm, golden glow spilling from inside. The house no longer felt like a museum made of glass and expensive silence. Tonight, it felt alive, filled with the warmth of cinnamon cocoa simmering in the kitchen. The sound of Lily humming a Christmas tune under her breath, and the soft rustle of wrapping paper she insisted on doing herself, even if the tape stuck to her elbows more than the gifts. In the living room, the Christmas tree gleamed with lights Desmond and Lily had hung together. Some straight, some crooked, all perfect. Lily stood on a small step stool, reaching up to place her mother's scarf near the top of the tree. The soft fabric draped gently over the highest branch, its faded blue threads shimmering faintly under the lights. She liked blue the most, Lily whispered. Said it looked like hope. Desmond steadied the stool with one hand, his other holding a glowing star. Then she picked the right place, he murmured, handing it to Lily. She pressed the star into his palm. You put it, she said. Mommy would want that. His throat tightened. He secured the star next to the scarf, stepping back to admire how the two nestled together. Light and memory woven into the heart of their new home. Later, wrapped in her new fuzzy pajamas, Lily curled beside Desmond on the couch, resting her head against his arm. The fireplace crackled softly, filling the room with warmth and shadows that danced across the walls. Lily traced a small shape on his sleeve with her fingertip, an absent, tender motion he'd grown to cherish. Desmond, she whispered. Yeah. Sweetheart? She hesitated, breathing deeply, gathering courage in her little lungs. Are we a family now? The question hung in the air, fragile, trembling, beautiful. Desmond turned toward her, brushing a strand of her hair behind her ear. We've been a family from the moment you grabbed my coat, he said softly. The universe just needed time to catch up. Her lips curved into a small smile, the kind that didn't stretch wide, but bloomed gently, like a flower finally opening after frost. Just before midnight, they bundled up in coats and scarves. Lily insisted on wearing the crooked little scarf Sarah had knitted for Desmond. On Christmas Eve, the two visited Sarah's grave. Lily hung a symbolic gift, Mommy's last Christmas wish. Desmond lifted her up and whispered that her mother was still watching over her. They stepped into the soft blanket of snow covering the sidewalk and walked hand in hand to the botanical garden where Sarah rested beneath a newly planted cherry blossom tree. The night was still, save for the soft crunch of snow under their boots. Lily held a small handmade ornament wrapped carefully in tissue paper. When they reached the tree, she knelt in the snow, brushing flakes off the stone marker. Hi, Mommy, she whispered, her breath clouding the air. We brought you something. She unwrapped the ornament, a tiny wooden circle painted with a star and the words, Mommy's last Christmas wish. Her hands trembled, but Desmond steadied them as she hung it on a low branch. Together they stood, gazing at the ornament swaying faintly in the winter breeze. Lily leaned into his coat. Do you think she sees us? She asked quietly. Desmond bent down, lifting her into his arms, holding her close against the cold. Every day, he said, his voice thick with emotion. And she'd be proud of you, Lily, of everything you've become. On the walk home, snowflakes caught in Lily's hair, melting into tiny sparkles against her curls. She held his hand tightly, swinging their arms gently as she hummed the same tune she used to hum beside Sarah's bed. When they stepped back inside, warmth wrapped around them instantly, as if the house itself welcomed them. Lily ran to her room for a moment, and when she returned, she held out a piece of paper, freshly drawn, edges slightly wrinkled, colors bright and soft. "I made this for you," she said, almost shyly. Desmond took it carefully. It showed the two of them standing under falling snow, Lily in her pink coat, him in his long, dark one, holding hands beneath a starry sky. Their silhouettes overlapped slightly, as if their shadows had found each other too. At the bottom, she wrote in her neatest handwriting, "Where Christmas Found Us." Desmond felt something shift deep inside, a peace he hadn't known since before tragedy carved a hollow space in his life. He pulled her into his arms, pressing a gentle kiss to the top of her head. "This is the best gift I've ever received," he said. Ever. But Christmas in Lily's world wasn't complete without sharing. So after cocoa and cookies and one last look at the tree, they loaded bags of small presents, coloring books, mittens, boxes of warm meals into the car. "These are for the kids who don't have enough," Lily said proudly. "Like Mommy wanted." They drove through quiet streets dusted with silver snow, stopping at shelters, hospitals, and the very neighborhood where Lily had once lived in fear. Each time Lily handed a gift to another child, her smile grew just a little brighter. Each time Desmond saw her joy, he felt his heart settle more firmly into a place it had been searching for. Near dawn, as the horizon glowed pale gold, they returned home. Lily stood by the window, watching the last snowflakes drift down, the soft light reflecting her small frame onto the glass. Desmond approached, wrapping his arms around her from behind. Their reflections overlapped, two silhouettes blending into one warm, glowing shape. He closed his eyes, lifting his face toward the heavens for a quiet moment, and to the wife he once feared he would betray by moving forward. He whispered softly, "You were right. Love never disappears. It just finds someone new to save." When he opened his eyes, Lily turned around, smiling sleepily. "Can we do this every Christmas?" she asked. Desmond scooped her into his arms. "Everyone," he promised. Outside, the world was covered in fresh snow. Inside, a new family had already begun to bloom. In the falling snow of Christmas Eve, a new family was formed, not from blood, but from love between a father who had lost faith and a little girl who had just lost her mother, yet found enough love to save them both. If this story touched your heart, even just a little, we invite you to stay with us. Because here at Restoring Tales, every story reminds us that love, kindness, and second chances still exist. And if you felt moved, please take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who might need a little hope today. Every click helps us spread more kindness into the world. There are more tales waiting, stories of resilience, hope, and quiet heroes among us. So if you believe in the healing power of love and the beauty of life's small moments, be sure to subscribe to Restoring Tales and turn on notifications, because the next story might be the one your heart's been waiting for. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.